And for more at what's going on at the Pan-African Parliament, we joined now by Faith Mabera, who is a senior researcher at the Institute for Global Dialogue. You've been watching these developments. I want to talk about the council that has come from the PAP legal body and also from the AU, given the fact that the PAP is made up of representatives of AU member states, that there ought to be a rotational leadership. What are your thoughts about this?
Good evening, Tabis, and good evening to the viewers. Yes, as you've already alluded to in the segment, it's correct that there has been a legal opinion coming forward from the Legal Council of the AU that indeed the principle of regional rotation stands. And this is actually the heart of the dispute. So on one hand, you have the question of precedent versus the question of principle, the principle of regional rotation versus the precedent, as some have argued, particularly those in the Western Caucasus, that the Bureau and the executive of the PAP should be elected by direct election. So that's where the discontent seems to come from. I think at this moment, it being a question of a legal question outstanding, I think it would be prudent for them to abide by the direction of the mother body, which is the AU in this case. And if the AU has given the direction that the regional rotation should prevail, then it should be so. So I think it's a matter of, the question is, will all member states or all members of the PAP as it stands now actually abide by the rule, which is what we're seeing playing out at the moment. Exactly. So it's raising very difficult questions, particularly as you've had some of the arguments about the partial ratification of the Malabo Protocol, because what the Malabo Protocol, Article 27 of the Malabo Protocol is intended to do is to actually give full legislative function to the PAP. But as was already said, it hasn't been ratified by all 28 member states. So it's a question of an unfinished business there that is opening up a whole can of worms.
And what I'm curious about is why this situation would not have been foreseen, given the internal politics of the AU mother body itself. It's very familiar with these divisions, especially south, north, west, east, etc. Why was precedent not followed, so to speak? So
that's the question. That's what we've been asking ourselves, because could it be, and here, if you'll indulge me a bit, could it be that this is just a microcosm of the kind of power politics that have been at play all along? But it's come to this point where the exposure and the outright confrontation is what has actually brought it to the surface. Could it be that it was playing out all along, but sort of under the surface, and now it's blown out? But I think it's been there all along, and this is also raising the very question about for a body that is supposed to actually promote continental solidarity, and we are seeing scenes like what we are seeing. It begs a question of what is the actual utility of such a body going forward. In fact, I was just perusing through some of the commentary by social media users, and some have been asking very interesting questions. Some have been asking, they actually didn't even know what the role of the PAP is. They weren't even aware of it. There's a PAP up until this moment. So it's raising this very important questions about, one, utility, and two, the question of power play. Because if you remember also, just at the continental level also, a few years back, there was this very scandalous report that came out about very cartel-like operations also behind the AU Commission. So there is a kind of dirty politics that's been playing out, maybe not in full view, but it's now coming to the surface, and I think the chickens are now coming.
And I think that's why a lot of people, as you say, are surprised, those who are familiar with it, because this is not new, especially within the AU. We've seen that play out on the appointment of the AU Commission head and allegations of bribery, etc. But more to the point that you made, that the PAP was established to steer peace, security, and stability, but more than anything to coalesce the people of Africa around a common destiny. So given these huge divisions, do they need to go back to the drawing board, including on the utility of the Pan-African Parliament itself?
I think for now, the the most immediate task is to actually sort out the outstanding legal issue, which is the question of elections, and maybe only after that actually address, number one, whether the Malabo Protocol will ever come into force, because I mean it's been now outstanding for well over a decade in terms of not getting the full ratification of the required 28. So far, only 11 members have ratified. That's the immediate focus. And then after that, then comes the question of whether are we just dealing with a white elephant institution? What's the purpose going forward? So it means coming back to the drawing board at the continental level, and actually finding a way of just recovering from this embarrassment, because it is an embarrassment for all of us as Africans. It seems like it's playing out and descending into chaos when it's such a matter that I'm sure would have where a more level-headed approach would prevail going forward, I think.
I want to talk about another issue, that is the structure of the PAP and what parliamentarians are expected to do. We've often heard this complaint that they are deemed as being here on holiday, that half the time they don't attend sessions, that all they're here to do is be on shopping sprees, etc. So the Secretariat itself, does it need to strengthen the regulations for staff members, for members of parliament, to ensure that there is meaningful dialogue and exchange between countries?
So there are three main functions of any legislature around the world. So number one is the question of deliberation. Number two is the question of oversight, sort of expected to hold to account the key institutions of the AU, and to actually hold them accountable for implementation of policies and programs. And number three is the more legislative function, which is to actually bring the legislative power to bear in terms of suggesting or proposing more enforcement measures. Now, the PAP has only two of these three. It has the deliberative function and it has the oversight function. It does not yet have the full legislative function because, as I said, of the partial ratification of the Malabo Protocol. But as you said, there is a perception that perhaps most of the members are here only to enjoy the perks, the allowances, the per diems, and not really engage fully or in a fully a meaningful way, which is a criticism that we've had countless times. But I think the bigger question here for me is whether we're dealing with, as I said earlier, a white elephant project, because that also speaks to the broader question of reform. Yes, we're talking about creating an AU, largely speaking, that is functional for all, but this means cutting down where we see something is not the weakest link, so to speak. But that is, I think, it's a very politically charged debate at the moment. So whether there will actually be even more, as you say, more sort of forceful, more enforcement measures just at the PAP level is also another politically charged question. Personally, I don't think that would be the case here.
Thank you so much for your time and insights. Faith Mabera, Senior Researcher at the Institute for Global Dialogue. More on that situation there in Midrand with our foreign editor, Sophie Mkwena.